this week on Knowing Jesus with Pastor Erik Reed.
Even the words that Jesus is speaking, he says, even the words that I'm speaking are not my own. They're the words of the Father who dwells in me. In other words, I don't speak even on my own accord. Even my words are the words of the Father.
But whatever gain I had, I counted as loss for the sake of Christ. Indeed, I count everything as loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus, my Lord.
Hey guys, Pastor Erik Reed here. Thanks for tuning in to the program today. Today, we're going to be looking at John 14, 7 through 14. And in the Gospel of John particularly, we're beginning to ramp up as we get closer to Jesus' final hour. In this text, we're going to explore the difference between knowing God and knowing about God. We're glad you joined us.
John chapter 14, verses 7 through 14 is our text this morning. Jesus speaking says, "If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you do know me and have seen me." Philip said to him, "Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us." Jesus said to him, "Have I been with you so long, and you still don't know me, Philip? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, 'Show us the Father'? Do you not believe that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does his works. Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me, or else believe on account of the works themselves. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever believes in me will also do the works that I do. And greater works than these will he do, because I am going to the Father. Whatever you ask in my name, this I will do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask me anything in my name, I will do it." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You can be seated. Let me start by saying something that I think you would all agree with, but I think we ought to all wrestle with, which is there is a difference between knowing about God and knowing God. J.I. Packer, in his famous book, Knowing God, opens with an illustration about a couple of people who would sit in the balcony of their home outside, and they would watch travelers going down a road that would take them into distant lands, and they would interact with travelers as they would come by their balcony, and they would stand up and begin to talk with them and hypothesize about the road ahead of them, and they would debate with them whether or not they were going the right direction and what to do. And at the end of the day, though, they always stayed seated on the balcony while everybody else was traveling the road. And Packer makes the point that these balconeers, as he called them, are a lot like a lot of professing Christians today. They love to talk about the path. They love to talk about the road. They like to debate about what's ahead or what might not be ahead, but they never walk the road. They're always balconeers. They're always onlookers, never the travelers. There is a difference between traveling the road of walking with Christ, knowing God, and being a person who knows about the path and talks about the path and watches other people walk the path and has opinions on what they're wearing as they walk the path, but never goes on it themselves. Which one are you this morning? Are you a traveler or are you an onlooker? Are you a balconeer or are you someone who's on the path? You see, Jesus is going to go into that issue in our text this morning. And he's going to get into the difference between actually knowing him and knowing who he is and walking with him and simply knowing about him. I remember when I was 21 years old, it was the first time I ever really had my eyes open to what it meant to actually know God, not just to know about him. I went to church as a kid with my grandmother when I spent the night with her on Saturdays. And all of my years growing up right here in this city with all of these churches and all these steeples all around me. You can't hardly be anywhere in the town without the shadow of a steeple hitting you in the face somewhere. And yet all those years of growing up here, I never once heard that it was ultimately about knowing God and walking with him and having relationship with him versus simply behaving or believing the right things. And behaving and living for God's holiness and glory, and right, that's good, and believing the right things matters. But for me, it always had been about just being in the right steps, doing the right things, having the right traditions. And I never knew until I was 21 that it was about actually walking with God. I remember reading through all 4 Gospels in about a 2-day period one time. My heart was just hungry for God. I had new stories about the Bible. I knew stories about Jesus, but it was actually in reading through the scriptures and actually feeling like I'm hearing from God and knowing what it was like to know God, to hear his voice, to want to live for him. I remember doing a study called Experiencing God, which was the first time I ever thought there's more than just knowing about God. There may actually be an experience to walk with God, to know him. And I remember feeling so ripped off for years of being all around churches and yet never hearing these things. Eventually, a few years later, it would lead me to plant the Journey Church at 25 years old, as if I had any business doing that. But you know, the heart behind starting the church was, I bet there's more people like me. I bet there's more people like me who've grown up in this area all around Jesus and don't know him, who are terribly familiar with him but don't know him from Adam. I bet there's people here who know all about Bible facts, but they don't know how to hear God speak through the Bible. And that's what led to starting the journey. And I was right, there were other people. And maybe for some of you, that is your story too. You grew up all around it, but didn't know it. I think for many of us, we grew up on the balcony, and our experience of Christianity was hypothesizing about the path while never walking the path. And this isn't a new thing. Jesus challenged those who were all around him every day who still didn't actually know him. Let's look together at this text because we're going to see that today. And we're going to see the challenge that Jesus offers on simply just being around him and having proximity to him doesn't mean you actually know who he is and are walking with him. Look at John 14, beginning back in verse 7. Jesus coming out of saying, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. Remember last week, he challenged them with, I am the truth. I am the way, right? You know the way because I'm it. And then he says this in verse 7. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you do know him, and have seen him. So Jesus makes an incredibly powerful statement here. He says, if they had known him, as in like truly known him, if they would have known who Jesus really was, his real identity, they would have known the Father also as a result of that. They would have known the Father. To know Jesus is to truly know the Father. Knowing Jesus and knowing the Father are the same, he says. Even though God the Son and God the Father are distinct persons, they are united as one, right? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, but the Word was God. So Jesus says, if you'd have known me, really, you'd have known my Father also. To know the one is to know all of them. Jesus says, from now on, you do know me. Look at that. From now on, you do know him, and you've seen him. And now they got to be thinking to themselves like, what? He says, from now on, you do know him, and you have seen him. Who's him? The Father. To know him is a relational knowledge. To know him is a revelational knowledge. It's to actually know God, not just facts about him. And that's what he's saying. He's saying, from now on, you do know the Father, and you've seen him. How is that? Because Jesus is revealing him to you. Why does Jesus say they've seen him? Because Jesus is God. To see Jesus is to see God. He is the visible image, what? Of the invisible God. He is the living embodiment of Yahweh, the Lord. To see him, to know him, is to know the Father. Now, just so we don't get this twisted, we're not saying that the Father becomes the Son becomes the Spirit. That's called modalism. That's a heresy. There's one God in three distinct persons, always existing, the Father, the Son, the Spirit. Yet they are so one, Jesus says, to see him is to see the Father. To see him is to see the Father. Now, watch this. Philip obviously is not tracking. Look at verse 8. Philip said to him, Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us. I love that. I love that he's like, hey, I tell you what, just show us the Father, and we'll be good. We'll be content. This is one of those moments where you can imagine, like the scriptures doesn't tell us, but you can imagine Jesus just face palms in that moment. You know what I mean? He's just like, his eyes roll, you know. He looks at another disciple like, this guy, really? Is he saying that? Like, that's what the sense I get on this. Philip is expecting like some kind of sign and wonder to be performed. Philip is expecting some kind of thing, right? He has God, watch this, he has God in the flesh standing in front of him, watch, and he's looking for something external. He wants something else. Jesus, just show us the Father, and look, that'll be enough for us. We'll be good. We won't ask for anything else. This, by the way, reminds us of why the role of the Spirit is so important, because watch, here is Philip standing right in front of Jesus, and he doesn't see and understand. By the way, guys, some of you are standing right in front of the Lord, and you see his works all around you, but you don't see. You see, but you don't see. You hear, but you don't hear. And that's why the Spirit must open your eyes. And the Spirit must unplug your ears. And you should pray that he would if you don't see it. But the role of the Spirit's vital here, because here's Philip standing before the Lord of glory in the flesh. In the flesh. And he's like, hey, just show us that external thing, and we'll that's good for us. We won't ask for anything else, Lord. He doesn't grasp it. So look at what Jesus says, verse 9. Have I been with you so long, and you still don't know me, Philip? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Jesus responds by asking him, Philip, have you been around for so long now? 3 years with me, every single day, and you still don't get it? Jesus, there's no doubt here, Jesus is a little frustrated, or you could even say disappointed. I mean, the question is like, have I been with you this long and you still don't know me? Have I been with you so long and you still aren't getting this? Watch, they're asking for something he's already given them. They're asking for something that he's already given them. They want to see God, and here he is right in front of them. How many times do we do this? How many times do we ask God for things he's already given us because we don't see it? How many times are we begging for God to do something that he's like, I've already given this to you. I've already done it. What else are you asking for? What else are you looking for? Oh, Lord, be with me today. He already is. He's given you his Spirit. Lord, would you guide me today? He already is. You just don't want to follow. That's a different sermon, but you know what I'm talking about. Jesus says, you've seen me, Philip. How can you say, show us the Father? How can you say that? To see me is to see the Father. Not because he is the Father, watch, but because he and the Father are one. He is the living embodiment of God. He is God incarnate. He is God in the flesh. They are distinct in their roles, but they are one in their nature. To see one is to see all.
Hey guys, Pastor Erik here. It's a privilege for us to be a resource for helping encourage and strengthening your faith through this ministry. Whether it be just from the television program or accessing our websites, resources, we're thankful that you find this ministry helpful to your faith. One of the ways that we would love to be helpful to your faith and come alongside of you is to also be praying for you. Many of you have different needs that you are facing or confronted with. Some of you are carrying burdens that are heavy loads. We would love to intercede and petition the Lord on your behalf. If you would like to let us know how we can be praying for you, why don't you email the ministry at prayer@kjmen.org. We look forward to hearing from you.
Verse 10. Do you not believe that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does his work. Jesus asked them this question: do you believe that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me? Or you could reword Jesus' question like this: do you believe that we are one? Do you not believe that we are one? Even the words that Jesus is speaking, he says, even the words that I'm speaking are not my own. They're the words of the Father who dwells in me. In other words, I don't speak even on my own accord. Even my words are the words of the Father. You see, but they don't fully grasp the identity of Jesus here. Well, guys, what this reveals is that they've been with Jesus for 3 years. He's on the eve of his crucifixion, and they still don't recognize him. They don't even still know what his true identity is. They don't grasp that he's God incarnate. They don't grasp that the relationship between him and Yahweh. They don't grasp who he is. This is why he's asking the question. They know he's special. They know he is sent from God. They know he's a great teacher. He's done miracles. They know he belongs to God in some special way. Remember, even Nicodemus was like, look, we know nobody could be doing the things you're doing if you weren't sent from God. But like Nicodemus, they don't grasp the real identity. They still don't get it. Imagine you're Jesus and you're on the eve of dying for sin, and your closest disciples are still not grasping it. That's where they're at. Verse 11, he continues, believe in me, believe me, that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me, or else believe on account of the works themselves. So Jesus exhorts them to believe that he is in the Father and the Father's in him. He's like, guys, believe me when I say the Father's in me and I'm in the Father. And if you don't believe my words, at least believe my works. If you don't believe what I'm telling you, at least go back and look at what I've done. And what has he done? Well, he's done a legion of things. He's multiplied loaves and fish and fed 5,000 people. He has walked on water. He has calmed a raging storm right in front of their face. He's turned water into wine. He's cast demons out. They've watched a dead man walk out of a tomb. He's like, look, if you're not going to believe what I'm telling you, have you not been around to see what I've done? Can't this be said of us too? Has God not done incredible works in our lives? Has God not been faithful to you? Has God not provided for you richly? Has he not blessed you? Has he not opened doors? Has he not mended relationships? Has he not overcome barrenness? Has God not displayed for you not only his power and glory, but his nearness to you? And yet we're always asking for more. We struggle with belief when he's abundantly not only told us who he is, but shown us who he is. Look at verse 12. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever believes in me will also do the works that I do. And greater works than these will he do, because I am going to the Father. So Jesus says that whoever believes in him will do the works that he does, and even greater works, but because he is going to the Father. So watch this. So the church filled with disciples of Jesus will do greater works than even Jesus. Now, let's hit the timeout button. Let's talk about that for a second. Let's clarify some things, because the greatest works Jesus accomplished, the things I just talked about, I know nobody personally who's done any of those things. Like, I don't know anybody in this room who's ever went to the graveyard expecting something miraculous to happen. And if you did try that, I would go, yeah, they're a little, yeah, you know. I don't know anybody here who went outside in the storm and said, hey, cut it out, and it listened. What's Jesus talking about when he says greater works you're going to do? Well, let me hit something real quick. There is no greater work that Jesus accomplished than the work of his sin-atoning death for sinners on the cross and his resurrection from the grave. That's the greatest work ever done. And watch this. And we can't do that work for ourselves. So we already know we can't surpass his greatest work ever. So what is Jesus talking about when he says, greater works than me will you do? What is meant by that? Well, here's what I believe the answer is on that. It's not greater in quality or power or might, but greater in scope. And let me explain what I mean by that. It's going to be the quantity of our works. It's going to be the number of people served by our works. It's going to be the deploying of our spiritual gifts by millions and millions of disciples all over the world. That's what he's talking about. Because I want you to notice here, he connects the greater works to his going back to the Father. So watch. He says, greater works than me are you going to do because I go back to the Father. Now, why is that significant? Well, it's significant for a few reasons. He's going to ascend to heaven, and he's going to intercede for his people as we do his work. He's also going to send his Spirit to indwell his people as we do his work. And he's also going to gift his people for the purpose of doing his work. So watch, his going back to the Father is absolutely connected to our going out and doing greater works. And why is it greater? It's not greater because we're going to match the might and the power and the grandeur of what Jesus did on earth. Watch this. We're going to surpass the number. Because, watch, Jesus could only be at one place at one time doing the things that he did. But when he goes to the Father and he sends his Spirit and he gives his church, we are going to go all over the world by the millions and use our gifts for the glory of God. The greater works often get confused with extraordinary supernatural things. I am not saying that we can't watch and see supernatural things happen. But let me give a warning here. Over-the-top charismatic churches and believers often say, hey, look at what Jesus said. So we're going to match or surpass these unbelievable, miraculous things that God in the flesh did on earth. And as a result of that, they think that what Jesus is saying is we're supposed to be going around and, healing every disease, and people who have, messed up limbs are supposed to be fixed because we're going out and doing those things, as if we could equal the miraculous powers that God did while he was in the flesh. And that's not what he's saying. I'm not saying miraculous things don't happen. Don't catch that. What I'm saying is Jesus isn't saying, oh yeah, you're going to do greater things than I did, namely, you're going to multiply fish and loaves, even more people will be fed. And you're going to, no. More people will be fed because more of us are going to go out to serve the poor and feed them. Not because we're going to have some power in ourselves to do that. I think we can get this backwards when we begin to think Jesus meant, oh yeah, we're going to be marked by supernatural things, and that's going to be better than Jesus' work. That's not what he's saying. Look at verse 13 and 14. Whatever you ask in my name, this I will do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask me anything in my name, I will do it. Oh boy, here we go on this one. Dear Lord, I want a new Ferrari in Jesus' name. Is that what he's saying? Some people say yeah. These two verses can lead Christians into one of two ditches. One of two ditches. The first ditch is thinking that this is some kind of magic formula for getting whatever you want in life. It's some kind of magic formula, right? As long as you say in Jesus' name, you can claim anything you want. This is the name it, claim it prosperity gospel. This is the blab it, grab it theology. And this view, because Jesus says whatever and anything, that you should hold God to this by asking for what you want. He said, whatever and anything. And here's what I want. Come back to this in a second. The second ditch we got to be careful of is we neglect this promise and we never fail to ask for anything. Because we're afraid of that first ditch, some of us go into the second ditch. How many of you, if you're being honest, because of the first ditch and experiences and things we've seen, we tend to drive our car into the second ditch on this one? Anybody feel that? Yeah, about 10 of us. The rest of us are lying. I would say for you, most of the room probably leans that direction, because we know Jesus isn't given a blank check in this text, as if like, hey, anything, right? If you want to own the Taj Mahal before you die, just ask for it in Jesus' name. I mean, we know that that's not what he's saying, right? But because we kind of are leaning away from this ditch over here, we tend to gravitate to this ditch over here, and we fail to ask things because we don't fully grasp the promise that he's making here. This is about asking for things in alignment with the will of God, this promises. This shapes the things we're asking for. This shapes the things we're praying about. We're asking for God's will to be done. In fact, the things that we ask for to be aligned with God's will in our lives. Let me give you an example of this. Look at 1 John 5, 14 and 15. By the way, this is the same John writing this. 1 John 5, 14 and 15. Look at what it says. It says, and this is the confidence that we have toward him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. Notice that caveat. What? If we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And if we know that he hears us in whatever we ask, we know that we have the request that we have asked to him. Now put those two things together, and now you have a better understanding what Jesus is saying, right? When he says, whatever you ask in my name, this I will do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask me anything in my name, I will do it. The key for understanding what is being meant in this passage is when he says in my name, meaning in alignment with my will. Right? You don't ask for things in Jesus' name that Jesus wouldn't want to put his name on. We ask in his name because we're aligning with his will. We ask with confidence. When we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. So watch, this doesn't mean you can't ask for things. This doesn't mean you shouldn't say, Lord, would you bless my family? We haven't gone on a vacation in 5 years. Would you open a door for us to go? It's not like the Lord's like, oh, how selfish of you. Right? I mean, but here's the key. Lord, if it's your will.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. I hope you've been challenged to think about the difference between knowing facts about God versus knowing God. In the Bible Belt, and for those of us who grew up in church, this is something we have to fight against. We hope you'll join us next week as we continue diving in deeper into what it means to know God.